from people outside the community, whether it's government and so on, to actually do something?
Well, so I'll sort of take a crack at it, Donald. Thanks for the question. In terms of your earlier remarks, I think we need to be vigilant and continue to make it easier for community members to report these hate crimes, right? Raising awareness is one thing, but yet making it easy for these things to be reported and to have the proper authority to respond to it is extremely important. I mean, everybody has a cell phone these days, right? Everybody has a camera in their pocket. I mean, just look at what happened in New York. That young man in the subway. I mean, he was beaten almost to death. He was choked. He was, he was being beaten to the point where he was unconscious. And yet people were taking videos of it, right? And that lasted for over, about 2-3 minutes at least. And so, I had the privilege and took an initiative to start working with some of the organizations like ACLU. They have Mobile Justice, which is one of the software that they have used in the past as a platform to report, to report police brutality in the past, and been in contact with some of their ACLU people here in the California chapter, try to figure out a way how to make use of these cell phone applications to make it easier for hate crime reporting, right? The moment you take a video, what happened, right? Someone, whether it's being a xenophobia or some old man being beaten up in his own driveway, for example, with the GPS information that has been inherited in everybody's cell phone, take a video and have it reported right away and have the law enforcement to respond to that immediately. So, it makes it a little bit more easier for these crimes to be reported, makes it more difficult for these crimes to go unreported. Continue to bring about these awareness and ensure that everybody has a say in this and everybody can be a protector. Everybody, in addition to blowing the whistle, can actually take action to stop these crimes, to report these crimes, and to keep your community and your family and your neighbors safe. So I think this is one thing that we all need to continue to work on and be very conscientious about, and make an enhancement on.
Fred, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I think that, I agree with Anders in terms of we need to report, because right now there is, especially we find out that when people are personally attacked, they tend not to report it, a smallest percentage. If their home is robbed, almost 99% of them, they all report them because they have to claim insurance, I guess. Sure. But before we report a hate crime, we can report a crime, but if we want to say it's a hate crime, we must collect the evidence. Whether it's the victim or the bystander must hear what this person has said, if he has indicated any of the hate. So we need to understand the law. What is a hate crime? What groups are covered under the hate crime? And what kind of crime? And there are many, many, many categories. I do think we need to educate the community so that they are well versed in this issue, so they can be much better advocates themselves, and they'll understand, this is a hate crime. If somebody draw a swastika on a window and you can using water to spray it off, that's not a hate crime because there's no damage to the property. I mean, it gets to that complexity. But if they're using a acid or they scratch it, that becomes a crime because there's a damage to property. So we need to know all about this, but we also need to fix the law so that the people who are doing the hate, we need to take care of them. It's not that they can get away with the loopholes.
Sure, no, that's interesting. Because there's all kinds of legal and constitutional issues driving those decisions, and those are always complicated. That's why it takes hard work to get to that point. So a couple questions in the chat room. One basically is, what's the attitude in D.C., which I would probably think Congress and Department of Justice, maybe other areas. Are you seeing receptivity in response from Washington on these issues?
I can take a crack at it. I mean, with the swift and bipartisan support that you've seen in Congress. I mean, as you well know, how divided our current country is, and also the political ideology between, the Republicans and the Democrats. And you see this anti-Asian hate crime bill passed almost unanimously throughout the entire Congress. It shows that there is an urgency, and there is a solidarity, and there is a sense of it's call for action where it has gotten to the point where it is a national topic. And I've been in this country for over 30 years, and I've never seen hate crime rising to the level that we've seen like this. And it's on the news, it's in your face, it's gotten to the point where it's really unacceptable. I mean, and the people are afraid to go out, right? My parents are afraid to walk out of their driveway, and they live in San Francisco. And so, I believe it has gone to the national stage, and it really is time for the Asian Americans to really stand up, and, for lack of a better word, ensuring that we get our fair share of resources to ensure that these things don't happen to any of us again. Our community needs to feel safe, and additional resources call for. And, as you can see how these federal legislation get passed so quickly, Representative Mang, Representative Dewey Chu in California has worked together in sponsoring this bill and really pushed this forward. You're seeing bipartisan support on this. So, this is the right time for the Asian Americans to push these agendas.
Right. So another question, let's see. Okay, no, so it was a little bit related, and in essence, it basically says, how can we prevent, it says the president, but let's say all future leaders of all types from using such inflammatory language? The basic answer is voting against the person. But is there, there's a structure, we have a constitutional structure, we have election structure, that's how things work. Anybody have brilliant ideas of how to how to prevent a leader from using inflammatory, negative, and frankly, racist language?
Well, I've spoken earlier about
a good book if you can come up with that, just so you know.
Yeah, I think that we have to start looking at hate speech to not be protected. Right now, it's protected under the First Amendment, and hate speech should not be protected because all violence, all hate crime starts with a speech, starts with words. Words does matter. So unless if we don't deal with it, we'll continue to have these things. If it's not this group, it's that group. We have to hold political leaders to their words. And if they are not, it's not just the voting. We know the voting does not work because so many of the people in the district, these people, terrible people, keep on getting re-elected because our system is not a good system.
Yeah, of course, the challenge of that, you have to vote also to amend the Constitution and revise the First Amendment. So that's
no. You cannot scream fire in a theater. So by extending that, you can extend hate speech to a certain limit. But then we have to fight in terms of probably to the Supreme Court. But unless we start fixing things like that, I mean, we have all the law there is. We don't need the Asian hate crime law in the federal level to protect us. We have all the law. We should not be getting protected, attacked in the first place. What's another law going to do to help us? I don't think anything's going to help us. The politicians going to think they look good. Oh, we did this. What did you do? It will continue to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. Any other ideas on how to prevent leaders from speaking poorly? That's a challenging question, I realize.
I mean, I can try to take a crack at it if you don't mind, Donald. I mean, First Amendment right it's a part of the Bill of Rights. It's a pretty monumental piece of legislation, obviously, and it protects a lot of different areas. And I understand the frustration there, Fred. I truly do. And I think we need to differentiate hate speech in terms of who is making those hate speeches. It's probably not an easy task, and it's a pretty monumental task to change the Constitution in terms of hate speech and free speech. But I will say that elected officials and elected leaders had to be held to a higher standard, right? I would say it is a fair statement that hate speech could be considered conduct unbecoming of an elected official, and that's subject to impeachment, for example, right? May not necessarily rise to the level of a felony on a regular citizen, but if someone is in the position of power, they should be held to a high accountability. And if they've exhibited unacceptable behavior that demonstrate conduct unbecoming of this office, they should be subject to public scrutiny and impeachment.
Yeah, very complicated issue, I'm sure. And then sort of my, I don't know, we might have a few more questions. My question sort of almost is like, what's the underlying cause, right? And I go back to, I think of, the movie South Pacific, which was, when I was younger, I thought, boy, what a great movie. And I even, it teaches about racism, it teaches about bias and prejudice. And I even pulled out the lyrics. And the first phrase says, you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed into your little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. And that sounds great, but is that actually true? Are we just born good and we're taught to be bad? Or are we, this is like a philosophical question, been going on for as long as philosophy happens, right? Or are we born kind of evolutionary way from evolution, kind of suspicious of others? And what we really need to do is have civilization and teach people to love and be tolerant. And I tend to think that's actually the real world. And so just stopping people from hating is going to be hard. Maybe teaching them to be more tolerant and more civilized, maybe that's more of the answer. I'm not sure, but I don't know if you have a view on them. That's sort of like the big question underlying cause. Are people good or are people bad as a natural state of humans?
I think people are born good, but they're very vulnerable and they're susceptible because it's easier to scapegoat other people for their own fault. And we can see that in a child. They're all basically good, but they want to blame others for their own mistakes. And as humans, we keep on growing that way. And that's the nature of what's happening. So people have not grown up, even though they're 77 years old.
Yes. Yeah, well.
I guess my comment, I think, to Fred is, I truly believe when we were born, we were all innocent.
Yes.
It's all about education, uprising that are shaping up who we are today. So I guess education play a key role, to correct mistakes and really to address the hate issue.
I'm sure. So
yeah, and I largely agree with that. I mean, you don't see, let's say someone holding a baby, right? A baby doesn't just hate you, right? No matter what the color of your skin or color of your hair or the language you speak or how you dress, right? These things are learned, in the later part of one's life. So education plays an extremely important role in ensuring that these things don't happen again. And that's why dedicating resources to education in early education in our children and investing in that and then making them understand and educating them that racism is not okay, xenophobia is not okay, inclusiveness and diversity is the fundamental value and it's the fabric of our society. Like I said again earlier, this country was founded by immigrants. And so, there's no perpetual foreigner in this country. And so we're all equal and we all, stay in this country in our rightful way. So, racism is taught. There's no question about it.
Right. I think teaching and maintaining tolerance is actually an active, everyday thing that we have to do. You see it, I'm reminded of the former Yugoslavia. There was a period of time where the cultures and religions and everybody was intermarried and living with each other. And then all of a sudden, at one point in time, it was like magnets with little shavings. They just pulled apart and started attacking each other. And it just has to be worked on all the time, continuously, right? There's no more questions in the chat room, and I'll give some closing remarks unless anybody has any final comments you'd like to make on any of this.
Well, I just want to add something to what Anders has said. I think that this country is founded by immigrants, but every group of those immigrants, once they establish themselves, they turn away new immigrants. Until those new immigrants establish themselves, then they turn away other immigrants. I can tell you that Chinese established immigrants, they don't like the new immigrants. Hispanic established, even though they're illegal, they're coming to the United States and now they're citizens, they don't want to see more Hispanic coming into it. We need to fix the problem. This country is to have too much hate and too much of me, rather than sharing. So again, I'm just talking about the reality. We got to get down to the reality and not to just feel good. Otherwise, we will not be able to solve our problems.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you, Fred. Henry, anything else?
Yeah, I guess the takeaway from all this is really, I think efforts has to be cohesive, collaborative, and all-inclusive in addressing hate and AAPI issues in going forward. And I still believe it has to be a public-private partnership in order to work effectively and efficiently. So I also want to brag about, and actually that we should all be, I think this is part of education, to brag about AAPI accomplishments and achievement in business world, cultural, social, you name it. So I guess I would like to borrow a comment from Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning, right? Staying together is progress. And in working together boldly is success. I'm gonna borrow, Anders' word, bold. So that's my comment.
Great, thank you, Henry. Anders, any final comments?
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree, and I resonate with a lot of the things that both Fred and Henry already said. One little takeaway, I live in the Bay Area, one of the most diverse places you probably would ever have to visit. You can visit, along with New York, obviously, Fred. I don't need to take that away from you.
Come.
I'll ride in your subway and I'll ask you to be the tour guide.
Sure.
But I live in the Bay Area where over 20 to 30% of our populations identify themselves as AP. Many of them are ethnic as well. In general, the API community here are pretty well respected, and we don't see too much of these serious hate crime, but yet we still, last few years, seen a really uptake of these things. And part of it, and you have to look at the broader picture. How do you, as a society, how does one particular community get the recognition as well as have a say at the table? It's really to promote people within the community who share your ideology and be able to support them as a representation. If you have a major metropolitan area where nearly 30% API population, and yet you don't see a similar percentage of representation in your legislature, in your council, in your county, in your county elected offices and city elected offices. If you don't have a say at the table, your agendas don't get heard, your voices don't get heard. And so, we as Asian Americans, and I guess it has a lot to do with our historical culture, right? It is true that not too many Asian countries have had a true democracy where people actually goes to the polling station and vote for their leaders, And so with that said, I think this is something that we really need to look hard at ourselves and say, how much do we participate in just democracy. Democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a participatory sport. If you don't vote, your voice don't count, right? If you don't elect a leader that can represent you, you don't get the mic. It's just that simple, right? And so, with that, one thing that I wanted everybody on this call, and long after this call is over, and I want people to understand and have that as a takeaway, is that we need to participate. As an Asian American, as a Chinese American, as a first generation Chinese American, born and raised in Hong Kong, right? You have to participate. You have to vote. You have to sink in to be engaged in the community, and really take ownership of these issues, and say enough is enough. For those who has the ability to make a difference, need to rise up, take leadership, and go make a difference. Right? It is incumbent upon us to make those changes. Change don't come about just because we ask for it. We have to be the change. And for those who are capable, for those who I've always believed that when people ask me why I run for political office, and I resonate your reservation, Fred, about being a politician. I truly do. It's those who has the ability to make a difference, has the responsibility to make a difference. And that's why I do what I do. I feel very proud of it. And even though it takes a lot of toll on my family, and I believe my wife is on the call right now, and she can testify to that. And so, with that, and it's not just about one person. It takes the whole community, right? The community need to get involved. They need to support, they need to have their voices, or they need to speak at the mic whenever it's available, whenever it's possible, so that people knows that you're serious and that you're upset and that you want change. And the people who you voted in power will facilitate those changes on your behalf. And that's how democracy works. And as real as it gets, again, democracy in politics is not a spectator sport. You cannot sit there and wait for changes. You have to participate and be that thing.
It's almost as common.
Can I add?
Please try.
Okay. So first of all, I totally agree with Anders that we have to be politically involved. But I do not think we can use as excuse that we did not come from a democracy country, because the Jewish people didn't come from a democracy. They come from Holocaust. The African American people did not come from a democracy. They came as slaves. And so many people come to this country because they want a better life. They didn't come from a better world to come here. Our system, whether we like it or not, this is it. This is the system. We need to know the system. We need to use the system. We cannot use some other format of a government somewhere else in the world and try to apply our ideology over here. This is it. The most important, I do think, is that we need to care about others. We need to care about the Muslim community. We need to care about the Jewish community. We need to care about the African American. We need to show compassion when they are hurt. Because if we don't care about them, why do they should care about us? And people support us, people vote for us, people do things for us because it's something we're doing for them. So I think I just want to leave everyone with that, is that we really have a long way to go to care about, learn about other people's demise, other people's unfortunate, and really extend our hand and go out and help them. And then we will be helped, or we will be protected.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that, Fred. It's about bringing communities together, right? There are way too many marginalized communities in this country. And just being an Asian American, by ourselves alone, it's not going to solve this issue. People have to come together, right? And there has been many attempts to pit one community over another, right? The African American community, the Hispanic, the Latino communities, pitted against the Chinese and American communities. We've seen all of that tactic. And so, instead of being divisive, we've got to let people come together. We've got to promote that unity And you're absolutely right on point in terms of how we must also demonstrate our care to other marginalized communities. Because if we can unite among all of us, imagine the amount of power we have, and how big of that message can be, and how people will resonate with that. And that's one of the main reasons why when I held that May 15 rally in San Mateo County, and it's county-wide of 800,000 people population, we branded it as Communities United. Instead of saying just API, instead of just about anti-hate, it's about bringing people together. It's about bringing all the communities together, whether you're LGBTQ+, you're Chinese American, Asian American, Black American, Latino American, African American, Native American. It doesn't matter. People need to come together and understand that hate has no place in this country. And yet this is one common goal that we need to unite behind, and really stamp out these racism as a whole, not just to a particular community. So.
Yeah. Well, on that hopeful note, I think we'll end this event. So these are important issues that obviously have a lot of work to be done, and we'll continue discussing within our Hong Kong Association communities and elsewhere.